Hi everyone, welcome to the Real Estate Red Zone, brought to you by the Real Estate Center at Texas A&M University. I'm Haley Reeder, Communications Specialist. Today is Wednesday, March 4th, 2020. On this day in 1904, the Batson Old Oil Field, located in Hardin County in the Beaumont-Port Arthur metro, reached its peak daily production. That day, the field yielded more than 150,000 barrels of crude. Along with the Spindletop, Sour Lake, and Humble fields, Batson helped establish the Texas oil industry. Batson Field was first drilled in 1903 and was still producing 90 years later when its cumulative production reached more than 45 million barrels in 1993. Now on to today's podcast. Please note that this interview was recorded before the Federal Reserve announced that it has cut its benchmark interest rate by 0.5 percentage point. We've included a link to more information about the rate cut on the podcast webpage and in the YouTube description box. Last month, the Center and the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas hosted a conference called Room to Grow: Housing for a New Economy. The conference was overall a great success, so thank you to everyone who attended. Center Chief Economist Dr. Jim Gaines and Research Economist Dr. Luis Torres join us to share what they learned from the conference. Thanks for being here.
Oh, no, it's our pleasure. This is great.
Thank you for having us.
Can you give a quick overview of Texas housing market so far this year?
Yeah, we need to know that the past decade, the decade of the 20-teens for Texas, was an outstanding decade, start to finish, the complete decade. And this is despite the fact that in 2014 and 15, we had a oil price bust cycle that went through our economy, went through our housing market, went through everything, went through the state in employment. And even at that, the total decade was still head and shoulders above almost any other decade Texas has had, with the possible exception of the 70s when we had the big oil price run-up. So it was interesting to take. We're going into the 2020s as a decade, not just as a year. And what we can look forward to in Texas for the coming decade. Well, so far this year, 2020, we're only a couple of months into it, so it's little soon to tell. I can tell you that 2019 ended as a very good year for the housing market. The sales volume was up, total home sales. In fact, in 2019, for the first time in the history of the state, according to the data that we collect, as you know, in our data relevance program with the Texas Realtors Association, we have access to all of the MLS sales data. So what I'm citing are data that come through the MLS. But we topped $100 billion of residential sales this past year. That's a phenomenal amount of money, and it's going to go up. I can tell you that 2020 will be another step-up year. We're looking for sales to increase on the order of about 6% after about 4%, a little better than 4% last year. So we're looking for 2020 actually to be a very good year, maybe even better than last year statistically in terms of rates of increase and so on. Home price increases were good last year, but more on the moderate to long-term average level, that 4 to 5% or 3.5 to 4.5%. Which is more or less the statewide long-term average, as opposed to the 8 or 9%, even 10% in some markets, rates of increase in prices that we had a few years ago. And that's good. That's a good thing, that price increase leveling out. The market is still tight. There's still a low inventory. It's less than 3.5 months or thereabouts. And so it's still technically a seller's market. And that's going to be the boost for prices this year. We think the price will be between 4 and 5%, sort of across the board. And obviously, for those listening to the podcast, it depends on where your house is and what neighborhood you live in and what side of town and the neighborhoods, because it gets very localized. But just sort of across the board, we're looking at that 4 to 5%. As a result, one of the things from the conference, we're expecting home construction. Building permits to go up almost between 10 and 11% this year. That's a phenomenal. We had a little downturn.
Yes.
They were depressed a year or so ago. This is going to be the rebound year. Multifamily is still going to be really pretty high, but it's already showing that leveling off a little bit in terms of construction. We still have a lot of millennials. We still have a lot of young people. We still have a lot of 20-somethings that live in Texas, and they still need a place to live, and the apartment market is the place that shows up.
What are the biggest challenges that were discussed at the conference?
So I think if you want to summarize it in general, I think it was a technology disruption in the future for purchasing a home, financing a home, and supplying homes. I think the idea, especially the last panel with Paige Chip, it was really interesting to see. She showed a really cool slide, 2 slides, where she showed home building or purchasing a home, the experience of it from 1950s. The family picture, they want a new home, the picture of a home, and the master developments, right? And then they showed the experience of the 2000s and basically the same experience, right? So she I like the way she talked about how technology, like basically home construction basically has used the same technology for the past 50, 60 years. It hasn't changed in basically anything. So there's a big opportunity for, to help out. One of the biggest challenges also is home affordability, so how to supply homes at a cheaper, lower price, right? Make it more efficient to build a home. So I think that's an issue. Also, the other issue is she mentioned also the experience, we see all these new tech companies like Amazon, Google, of course, Zillow, getting into the business of home purchasing and selling homes, right? So that's another disruption of the experience of purchasing a home. Also the financing part, that's interesting for the mortgage bankers. He mentioned the idea of new types of, getting financing on an app, going online and getting your financing for your home also. So that's another change, disrupt. You've seen the commercials, mortgage, Rocket Mortgage, Quicken Loans. So that's, a trend. And going back to, I think Jim has mentioned a lot of this, and this is going forward. Interesting, the Generation Z, or like Jim likes to call it the Generation I, right? Because they were born with the internet. For them, the internet is normal, right? So that's a big change, because things that, I or Jim, I'm X, Jim is baby boomer. So I wasn't born with the internet, right? I still maybe want the experience of buying a home, or maybe I like the home builder, the way they build a home. Maybe I don't like offsite construction, but for them, for younger generations, for them, maybe it would be normal, right? Maybe I want to get my mortgage on a home. I was talking to a person from the Dallas Fed, actually, a person who attended the conference, and he was telling me, when I came here to move to Dallas, I actually went online, I told the realtor what house or where to buy. He didn't tell me. And he said, I would be interested in the idea of maybe going forward, experiencing Zillow's purchasing or Redfin's opportunity of purchasing and selling a home. So think about it. So he's changing that. Now, for that's going to be, I think, an important challenge. Now, going forward, we still have that challenge of, housing affordability in Texas. Now, we've always had that comparative advantage of the note of Texas being affordable. Of course, still we're affordable compared to California or New York. But going forward, as just mentioned, that onslaught of population moving to Texas, the strength of the Texas economy, the growth in the economy, has built pressures on housing affordability, especially for homes with a price tag below $300,000. So that, I think that's would be a major challenge. Is going to be a major challenge. The supply of homes. Can we supply homes at a price range where people want to buy that home, or the first time home buyer, right?
What trends could drive the housing market in the next, 2 or 3 years?
So it's a trend that I think Jim has mentioned and talked about, and I think Odetta did a great job also about that. And Tim mentioned that, people that initially, they try to, I don't know, we try to do that. Maybe it's because you get, we do it for every generation. We try to make younger generations, they're different than my generation. They're not, it depends on a lot of things, especially the millennials. As you can, one of the points made there is that a lot of them, are more educated, right? So that changed their life cycle, right? Instead of, I got my degree, maybe I got a master's. So of course I'm putting off not buying a home, right? And, or maybe I prefer I'm going to get married at an older age, but still at the end, the perspective is that current trends have shown is that now they're joining the housing market. They're purchasing homes. They're basically showing the same trend as all generations, but at an older age. So it doesn't mean, millennials are not going to buy homes. I think that's an inconceived statement, right? They are going to purchase homes. They're just doing it at a later stage in their lives, right? So I think that was really important, especially the education part. Now, the other issue, is supply issues. I think supply issues will continue to have an effect, like can home builders build a home at that price range, build homes for first-time home buyers, and also the effect of regulation here in the state of Texas also.
Yeah, Luis is completely correct. And of course, over the next 2 or 3 years, what's going to happen here? First of all, our fundamentals are still going to be strong in Texas. Job growth, jobs and income. You want to know what's going to happen in the world? Yeah. Watch jobs and income, and those fundamentals are still sound. Luis is exactly right, and it was one of the topics of the themes, if you will, that we heard in several of different speakers at the conference of the millennials who are now, especially from about 32 to 40 years old, are coming through the market. They're now fueling the economy and particularly the housing market. And they're doing it later. That when the boomers came through, when I came through, I'm a boomer. We were doing the same thing, but we were doing it in our late 20s. They're doing it in their later 30s. And it's, as Luis said, the whole thing just shifted a decade because we're all living longer, and things just happen longer. The millennials, it's no secret, get married a little later, have kids. The life cycle, the timing of the life cycle and the family life cycle is just simply moved out almost a decade worth of things. Number two, from one of the conclusions from the conference that maybe we haven't hit on yet and addressed, interest rates are still going to remain low. Monetary policy is going to be, quite honestly, is still going to be accommodative from the Fed. Now, they didn't say that. This is me interpreting. I don't want to put words in the mouth of the Fed. But it was clear that at least for the moment, there's no indication that they are going to either try to tighten raise interest rates again, and so on. In fact, for the upcoming year, and we didn't mention it, it didn't get a whole lot of coverage in the conference. The coronavirus and the downturn in the general U.S. economy, if anything, might spur the Fed to drop the rates a little bit more if the national economy slows down here in the next 6 months or so. I don't think this is immediate, but over the next 2 or 3 years, we're still going to see interest rates, plus or minus about where they are. I mean, they may go up a little bit, but it's not going to be a big jump or anything like that. So the housing market is still going to be very attractive. The supply is going to be a little difficult, but is getting better. The supply of lots and then the supply of houses that get built are going to be better. So we're still looking for that, and the demographic patterns that Luis. So jobs, income, demographic, people. If you take those three things, and as long as the regulatory bodies from federal to state to county to city to very local level don't get too restrictive, especially here in Texas, where we've not been overly restrictive regulatory-wise or law-wise, then the housing market still is going to be quite robust, quite frankly.
Yeah, and going back to Jim was mentioning about the interest rates and long-run interest rates. Well, think about what's a normal interest rate basically equals inflation plus real interest rate. So inflation, the Fed's objective is around 2%. So think about it, inflation 2%. Real, it's low because future growth of the U.S. economy is around 2%, so it's a low expected growth rate going forward. So that feeds into what's the nominal interest rates. So nominal interest rates going forward are practically going to be still low. They're going to remain low. If there's no inflation shock that drives inflation up, but there's nothing right now that would show you that inflation is going to go up, right? So think about it going forward. That's important, and we saw that. That's why Jim talked about it earlier. What happened in 2019, the start of 2019, when the Fed end of 2018 raised the Fed funds rate, interest rate went up. So what happened? That was really negative for the housing market, and we saw it in sales, and we saw it in building.
Right, the fourth quarter of the year.
So you saw that. So that's another pro. And going forward, yes, interest rates, are expected to remain low. So that's a good thing for us.
And in fact, they just came out yesterday, the PCE deflator, that's what the Fed actually looks at, was at 1.6. So it's below their 2% target rate. That's what I was talking about. If the Fed perceives that the economy is slowing down or declining enough, they might actually lower rates again. It is not very likely that they're going to perceive that the economy is going so fast or so strong or that inflation is such a problem that they need to raise rates. I mean, it's kind of easy to sit back. It's easy when you're not having to make the decision.
Right.
So that's easy for me to say. But you can kind of see which way that goes and get a feel for where it's going. The other trend, future trend, are institutional buying and selling. We're trying to get some handle on that, of what it's doing to home prices and the market. That's one of those technological changes that actually Luis just made a reference to here a minute ago. And there was a fair amount of discussion of that. So far, the iBuyer, the institutional buyer, the instant buyer, and the I has two different words that can go for it. The impact is fairly small. I mean, we're less than 2-3% of the market in general, but it's emerging and it's growing. And as Luis was pointing out, with the technology changes, particularly the young people who are very, very comfortable doing things online through the internet, dealing with an internet buyer or seller is far more comfortable to them than, say, somebody my age. There ain't no way I'm doing it. Yeah. But that is going to be the wave of the future, and this future of the 2020s, this coming decade. It'll be interesting to see how that emerges. It's going to have a real impact on the way business is conducted, the fee structure for appraisers, lenders, title companies, real estate agents, everybody that's involved in the food chain there of the buying and selling of real estate.
Yeah, they're trying to make it more efficient. It's like I mentioned earlier, with that home construction has been so inefficient for so many years. There's a lot of opportunities there to make a lot of money. Just to give you a little stat, Janet Rice from CBRE was mentioning that Texas alone had received $24 billion in investment in multifamily investment in 2019. $24 billion just in multifamily. People invested in Texas in multi. So that's a lot of money, right? Yeah. So think about all this mortgage. If you can get a mortgage, it can build a community. Another interesting part that the page I should mention was that Google. You think about Google, you think about technology, data, searching online. They just bought a master plan community in Toronto. Yeah. So they wanted to look at how people live, how to grow communities, multifamily apartments, everything to development and growth. So they're trying to get into that business also. So think about it. There's a lot of opportunities there, and all these disruptors are going to come into the market, right? And they're going to change it, right? It's going to be a different thing.
Things that you don't even think of. Warren Buffett just bought a manufactured home company.
Wow.
Now, if Warren has been historically somebody you watch to see what he's looking at and what's interesting to him. It doesn't mean it'll happen immediately. Yeah. Doesn't mean it'll happen in 2020 necessarily. But here again, if you take a longer decade look, if we look at the decade of the 2020s, one of the emerging areas is going to be the off-site constructed housing, call it manufactured housing if you'd like, but particularly in the lower price points. If we can get efficiencies, economies of scale, and get construction costs from currently $150, $160 a square foot for stick built, the people out there, doing the hammering and nailing, down to maybe $100, $110 a square foot. That's a big difference. Yeah. If you can get the operational and production efficiencies in a plant where you can chunk them out. And quite frankly, we're seeing examples. If you drove by some of these houses, you can't tell from a casual glance that these were not stick built and built. The roof pitch, the exterior finish, et cetera, doesn't lend itself to that at all. And that's going to be a major thing. The gentleman that was there from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they've just opened up programs to finance these properties with 30-year conventional mortgage financing, just like a regular, quote unquote, a regular stick built house. And that's a major up and coming program. It's still young. It's still there'll probably still be some problems with it, but over the course of the next 10 years, they'll get ironed out, and we'll see a lot of that, particularly in areas where we have a real pronounced affordable housing issues. They'll be on smaller lots. The footprint will be smaller. The houses themselves are generally going to be a little smaller. Instead of building 3,000 square foot mansions and plus, it's probably going to be on the order of 1,500 to 2,200 square foot finished product. But those are, and really it's a revert back to history. It's like you could buy a house from Sears Roebuck back in the 1920s.
I did not know.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
out of their catalog, which was the original internet.
Yeah.
But to go back to Jim's point, yes, but it could be smaller houses, but doesn't mean they're low quality.
No,
don't forget
exactly.
that. So
Good
think about it. It could be really nice quality, nice finishes. They can be built better even. Paige Ship was mentioning, I can't remember the exact amount, but I think like 13% or 15% of is waste. Home builders waste.
Yes.
Something a high percent. When she said that, I was shocked. Like, think about it, like money wise, you're like 50% of what you do is waste.
All the lumber you buy that you don't use.
Yeah, all those things, it's just waste. So think about it. If you can make it more efficient, you can increase the quality. The finishes are even better. It's a process, a manufactured process. So you're not losing. Maybe you're gaining more, right?
Right.
Obviously, the conference was extremely interesting.
Yeah.
On a number of different points,
Yes.
on a number of different issues. It's one of those kind of things you're sitting there and as a topic like what we're just discussing here comes up, it doesn't really get full thrift and share and discussion. So, but it stimulates the imagination. It stimulates the thinking here at the Real Estate Center. It stimulates us of what we need to be looking at and what we need to be researching and try to get on that leading edge and on the cusp so we can inform Texans about what to expect, what to look for, what some of the impacts are going to be, some of the problems for sure, and some of the outcomes that are the likely results. Will we be perfect on that? Probably not. Any kind of forecast is always wrong, but we hope that we're seeing those trends evolve and develop and get the information and as much information and data and analysis out to our people who pay attention to what we're doing.
Going back to Jim was saying, like, last thing, one of the interesting part of it, we talked about a little bit. I think Gerald's going to love that. Gerald's our data scientist in the center. I think he enjoyed that talk when for the Atlanta Fed. He's done a lot of research, but he basically focused on data. Yes. So it was interesting what he shows us to do data sets and basically kind of mentioned that we have better data to actually monitor and see what's happening in the housing market, especially in mortgages and housing finance. I think that was a good just to finish with that. Something else, like I said, like Jim mentioned, it was a lot of topics, really cool information. But just to mention that part of like the data part of it, there's better data now to look at what's actually happening in mortgage markets.
Well, thank you guys for coming on.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
Thanks again, Jim and Luis. I've posted a link to other podcasts featuring them on our podcast webpage and in the YouTube description box. I've also included links to their most recent articles. You can find even more articles by center staff on our research library. It includes a wide variety of economic reports and real estate articles. Our latest include the Texas Housing Insight Report, the 2020 Texas Economic Outlook, soil health practices, water resource issues, micromarkets, and more. We've included a link to the research library on our podcast webpage. That's going to be it for today's Red Zone. If you want more from the Real Estate Center, head to our website. That's www.recenter.tamu.edu. There, you'll find the latest data, research articles, blogs, news, and more. To stay up to date on when articles are published on our website, follow the Real Estate Center on social media. You can find us with the handle @RECenterTX on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. For more podcasts like these, subscribe on iTunes or to our YouTube channel. All podcasts are also available for free on our website. Thank you for joining us today in the Real Estate Red Zone, brought to you by the Real Estate Center in College Station, Texas, where we've been helping Texans make the best real estate decisions since 1971. This is Haley Reeder, and I'll see you next time. Bye!